but when I actually joined the club, there was no other club I wanted to join anyway.
You look at your own position and you think of the players you played along with in midfield, like Souness and Terry McDermott and Ray Kennedy, of course. There was a variety there.
And Case with a chance to shoot! And Case is in for his hat-trick! Case is away here. Chance for the shot and it's in!
There are footballers who are remembered for their technical brilliance, others for their sheer athleticism, and a select few for their ability to dictate the tempo of the game with both vision and skill. Jimmy Case, however, stands apart in a different way. His career is a tribute to something much more elemental, something that gets to the core of what the sport has always been for those who grow up with it in the working-class districts of cities like Liverpool. His name doesn't always roll off the tongue in conversations about English football's most celebrated figures, but to those who knew the game in its rawest form, he remains a giant.
And Case with a chance to shoot!
Case wasn't the man with the trickiest feet or the most delicate touch, but what he lacked in refinement, he compensated for with an indomitable will, relentless effort, and a right foot that could strike a ball as though it were an act of defiance. Born on the 18th of May, 1954, Jimmy Case grew up in a part of Liverpool where football was less a pastime and more a matter of communal pride. The boys who played in the streets weren't just dreaming of becoming professionals, they were often trying to escape the grind of dock work and factory shifts. For Case, who never considered himself an academic, football offered an alternative to the life his father had led, hard work on the Liverpool docks. "My dad worked his whole life down there," Case once said. "There was no shortcut in his world, and I knew there wouldn't be one in mine either." Case's early footballing journey was anything but smooth. Rejected by several clubs as a teenager, he was already showing the resilience that would define his professional career long before he pulled on a Liverpool shirt. He began his football apprenticeship playing for South Liverpool, a semi-professional side known for producing tough, no-nonsense players. It was there that Liverpool's scouts finally took notice. Case joined the club's youth setup in 1973 at the relatively late age of 19. For a club that was already home to future greats like Kevin Keegan and Ray Clements, it would have been easy for a raw, unpolished midfielder like Case to be overlooked. But Bob Paisley saw something in him that wasn't immediately obvious: grit, determination, and an ability to execute under pressure. By the time Case made his first team debut in 1975, Liverpool were on the cusp of something extraordinary.
Kennedy on his chest, and finding Case, and Case has got room for a left foot shot here!
Shankly had laid the foundations, but it was Paisley who would lead them to the pinnacle of European football. Case's debut was solid, though unspectacular. He wasn't the sort of player who made headlines with flashy skills or outrageous flicks. His game was rooted in practicality. "It wasn't about showing off," Case said years later. "It was about doing your job, and at Liverpool, you either did it or you didn't last long." Case's ability to do his job, however, became increasingly difficult to ignore. He quickly established himself as a mainstay in the midfield, where his physicality and ferocity set him apart. Standing at 5'9" with a stocky frame, Case wasn't the most imposing figure at first glance, but his tackles had a way of leaving a lasting impression. Opponents learned early on that he wasn't afraid to put himself about, and in an era when the game was far less forgiving than it is today, his fearless approach earned him respect, and more often than not, a few bruises. "I played the game the way I was taught," Case recalled. "You don't pull out of tackles, you don't back down." But it wasn't just his defensive capabilities that made him a critical part of Liverpool's success during the late 1970s.
Not a good punch, really. And it was knocked back in by Jimmy Case.
Case had a knack for scoring goals that defied both logic and expectation. He wasn't the type of midfielder who floated into the box and tapped in easy finishes. When Jimmy Case scored, it was usually from outside the penalty area, with a shot that seemed to gather venom mid-flight. His goal against Everton in the 1977 FA Cup semi-final is still talked about by those who witnessed it. Picking up the ball outside the box, he struck it with such force that the goalkeeper barely had time to react before it crashed into the net.
Heading the ball past his opponents, perfectly bounced for his right foot. The volley that all players like to strike, away from the goalkeeper. And
There's something special about scoring a goal like that, Case admitted. You hit it clean, and you know as soon as it leaves your boot that it's going in. That goal was a microcosm of Case's contribution to the Liverpool side that dominated Europe in the late 70s and early 80s. With players like Dalglish, Souness, and Terry McDermott around him, Case didn't need to be the creative spark.
And the chest down by Perriman dropped nicely for Dalglish, and now Kennedy. And Souness, can he turn on it? Pulled it back for Case. Dalglish!
His role was to ensure that the team's spine was solid, that the opposition knew they wouldn't have an easy ride, and that when the opportunity presented itself, he could provide moments of decisive quality. And he did, time and time again. Between 1975 and 1981, Liverpool's trophy cabinet was overflowing. Case played a crucial role in securing 3 European Cups, 4 First Division titles, and a UEFA Cup, among other honours. His contributions weren't always glamorous, but they were essential. As Dalglish put it, Jimmy was the kind of player who made the rest of us look good. He did the dirty work, and he did it better than anyone else. Bob Paisley, a man not prone to excessive praise, once referred to Case as one of the most reliable players I ever managed. But football is rarely a place for sentiment, and in 1981, Case found himself surplus to requirements at Anfield. With Liverpool evolving and new players coming through, the club made the decision to sell him to Brighton and Hove Albion. For some players, leaving a club like Liverpool could have marked the beginning of a decline. But Case wasn't built that way. His move to Brighton gave him a new challenge, and he embraced it with the same intensity he had shown at Anfield. At Brighton, Case became more than just a player. He became a leader. He captained the side and guided them to the 1983 FA Cup final, where they faced Manchester United in a match that has since become part of the competition's folklore. Brighton, the underdogs, fought bravely, but ultimately lost in a replay. For Case, the defeat stung, but his pride in what the team had achieved remained. "We weren't supposed to get that far," he said, "but we did, and that's something I'll always be proud of." After his time at Brighton, Case continued his career with Southampton, where he played alongside emerging stars like Alan Shearer and Matt Le Tissier. Even as he entered his 30s, Case's performances didn't wane.
Case, good turn! Oh yes!
He adapted his game, relying more on his experience and positional sense, and less on the raw physicality that had defined his early years. He played over 200 games for Southampton and remained a key figure in the dressing room. His influence on younger players was significant, with many crediting him for helping them navigate the early stages of their careers. Case's career eventually wound down with spells at Bournemouth, Halifax Town, and Wrexham before he retired in the early 1990s. But his connection to football never faded. He took on coaching roles and worked as a pundit, offering insights that reflected his understanding of the game's fundamentals. For Case, football was never about the glitz and glamour. It was about the effort, the sacrifice, and the camaraderie that comes from fighting for a common goal. Looking back on his career, Case remains modest about his achievements. "I was lucky," he says. "I got to play for some great teams, with some great players, but at the end of the day, I was just a lad from Liverpool who loved playing football." For those who watched him play, though, he was much more than that. Jimmy Case represented the heart and soul of English football, a player who gave everything, asked for nothing in return, and left behind a legacy that speaks for itself.